Hey friends, kind of excited about today's essay, The House of Rothschild. This book was published in 1865, this book, American Miscellany. And I'm just curious, what do they have to tell us back in 1865 about the Rothschilds? It's obviously quite a bit of information, so I'm curious to see what there is to know. This book is a very random collection of essays. It's called American Miscellany, and it is miscellaneous. Our last essay was Burning a Priest in Siam, which I expected to be horrific, but it wasn't. It wasn't actually. It was actually, respectful and beautiful. Very lovely expression of grief, very explosive towards the end, but a really good essay actually. So here we are. I have high expectations of our next essay. We're here on page 388 of this 161-year-old book, this collection of essays. So let's learn together. We're getting into essay number 151, The House of Rothschild. It is unusual to trace the origin of great families to some gallant exploit or some lucky accident which suddenly raised the ancestor of the house from obscurity and provided him at the same time with a legend to his coat of arms. The representatives of such families are born personages of history, their name, title, and estate, their position in the country, descending to them by inheritance, and so continuing from generation to generation till war or revolution damages or removes, I'm sorry, till war or revolution damages or removes the old landmarks of society. But there are other origins which it would be vain to endeavor to arrive at by a similar process, the origins of houses that rise steadily, not suddenly, in their peculiar career, and the success of which is not secured by a single incident, but distributed evenly over the lifetime of one or more generations. In such cases, the germ of prosperity must be sought for in the family mind, in the idiosyncrasy of the race, in the theory by which their conduct in the world is governed, and not the first accident which attracts the attention of the vulgar as the origin of their fortune, is merely a point d'appui, point of pressure, a point d'appui selected by forethought and resolution. Should I read that again? I should. In such cases, the germ of prosperity must be sought for in the family mind, in the idiosyncrasy of the race, in the theory by which their conduct in the world is governed, and not the first accident which attracts the attention of the vulgar as the origin of their fortune, is merely a point d'appui selected by forethought and resolution. The rise of the house of Rothschild presents a very remarkable illustration of his view of a question which will never cease to be interesting, and affords a striking instance of the natural and simple means by which those vast results are obtained, which it is customary to ascribe to chance or miracle. In the middle of the last century there lived in the town of Frankfurt on the Main a husband and wife of the Hebrew persuasion, who lavished all their cares upon a son, who they destined for the profession of a schoolmaster. The boy, whose name was Meyer Anselm Rothschild, and who was born at Frankfurt in the year 1743, exhibited such tokens of capacity that his parents made every effort in their power to give him the advantage of a good education. And with this view he spent some years at Fürth, going through such a curriculum of study as appeared to be proper. The youth, however, had a natural bent toward the study of antiquities, and this led him more especially to the examination of ancient coins, in the knowledge of which he gained to considerable proficiency. here was one step onward in the world, for in after years his antiquarian researches proved the means of extending and ratifying his connections in society, as well as of opening out to him a source of immediate support. His parents, however, who were noted as pious and upright characters, died when he was yet a boy, in his 11th year, and on his return to Frankfurt he set himself to learn practically the routine of the counting house. So they both died at the same time? After this we find him in Hanover, in the employ of a wealthy banking house, whose affairs he conducted for several years with care and fidelity, and then we see opening out under his auspices in his native city the germ of that mighty business which was destined to act so powerfully upon the governments of Europe. Before establishing his little banking house, Mayor Anselm Rothschild prepared himself for the adventure by marrying, and his prudent choice, there is no doubt, contributed greatly to his eventual success in the world, which, P.S., it always does. About this time a circumstance is said to have occurred to which the rise of the Rothschilds from obscurity is ascribed by those who find it necessary to trace such brilliant effects to romantic and wonderful causes. The Prince of Hesse-Kassel, it seems, in flying from the approach of the Republican armies, desired, as he passed through Frankfurt, to get rid of a large amount in gold and jewels, in such a way as might leave him a chance of its recovery after the storm had passed by. With this view he sought out the humble money changer, who consented reluctantly to take charge of the treasure, burying it in a corner of his garden, just at the moment when the Republican troops entered the gates of the city. His own property he did not conceal, for this would have occasioned a search, and cheerfully sacrificing the less for the preservation of the greater, he reopened his office as soon as the town was quiet again, and recommenced his daily routine of calm and steady industry. But he knew too well the value of money to allow the gold to lie idle in his garden. He dug it forth from time to time as he could use it to advantage, and, in fine, made such handsome profits upon his capital that, upon the Duke's return in 1802, he offered to refund the whole with 5% interest. This, of course, was not accepted. The money was left to fructify for 20 years longer, at the almost nominal interest of 2%. And the Duke's influence was used, besides, with the Allied sovereigns in 1814 to obtain business for the honest Jew in the way of raising public loans. The honest Jew, unfortunately, died 2 years before this date in 1812, but the whole story would appear to be either entirely a romance or greatly exaggerated. Rothschild must have already been eminent as a banker, or he would hardly have been selected by the Prince of Hesse-Kassel as the depositary of a sum amounting, it is said, to $250,000, exclusively of the jewels. At any rate, it was in the year 1801 he was appointed agent to the Landgrave, afterward Elector of Hesse, and in the next year, indicated in the story as that of the prince's return, a loan of 10 millions was contracted with the Danish court through the house of Rothschild. Before this, and necessarily so, no doubt, his knowledge and the tried rectitude of his conduct had gained him general confidence. His wealth had increased, and an enormous extension of the field of his operations had taken place. The fact appears to be that by this time the banker of Frankfurt was more in the habit of rendering assistance than of requiring it, and the Grand Duke of the day, to whom the Israelites owed their civic and political rights, nominated him a member of the Electoral College, expressly as a reward for his generous services to his fellow citizens. The personal character of the Meyer Anselm Rothschild is not of small consequence in the history of the house, for their dead father may be said to direct to this hour the operations of his children. In every important crisis he is called into their counsels, in every difficult question his judgment is invoked, and when the brothers meet in consultation, the paternal spirit seems to act as president. The explanation of this well-known and most remarkable trait in the family is not difficult to those who are in the habit of penetrating through the veil of the romantic in order to arrive at the simple realities of life. The elder Rothschild was obviously a man of comprehensive intellect, who did not act on the spur of chance or necessity, but after mature reflection and on rules distinctly laid down, and he must have brought up his children in a certain theory, which survived his mortal part, and became identified with his memory. This is the only eidolon conjured by the piety of his descendants. Eidolon? I guess maybe that's Latin for idol. This is the only eidolon conjured by, this is the only eidolon conjured by the piety of his descendants. His bearing, we are told, was tranquil and unassuming, and although a devout man, according to his views of religion, his devotion was so completely untinged with bigotry that in his charities he made no great distinguish between the Jew and the Christian. In 1812, Rothschild left to the mighty fortunes of which his widow had laid the foundation 10 children, 5 sons and 5 daughters, laying upon them with his last breath the injunction of an inviolable union. This is one of the grand principles to which the success of the family may be traced. The command was kept by the sons with religious fidelity. The co-partnership in which they were left remained uninterrupted, and from the moment of their father's death, every proposal of moment was submitted to their joint discussion and carried out upon an agreed plan, each of the brothers sharing equally in the results. What about the sisters? The other great principle of their conduct is one which actuates all prudent men, and is only deserving of special remark in them from the almost mechanical regularity with which it was acted upon. This was the determination never to run the slightest risk in pursuit of great profits. Their grand object was to see clearly its transaction to its termination, to secure themselves from all accidents that human forethought could avert, and to be satisfied with a reasonable and ordinary reward. The plan acted in twofold manner. By husbanding their capital, they were enabled to take advantage of 1,000 recurring commissions, so as to extend their connection day by day, while their habitual caution earned for them a reputation of solidity, which, united with their real wealth, carried their credit to a pitch which would have been dangerous, if not fatal, to less steady intellects. Credit, however, was no snare to them. They affected no master strokes, no coup d'etat. They would have used the lamp of Aladdin, not to summon genii, but to light their steps as they toiled on in the path of genii. So I guess that's the plural of genie. It's genii. So they would have used the lamp of Aladdin not to summon genii, but to light their steps as they toiled on in the path of genii. The only secrets by which they obtained their choice of innumerable offers of business were the moderation of their demands, the punctual fulfillment of their engagements, and the simplicity and clearness of their system. In short, the house of Rothschild became great because its affairs were conducted upon the most perfect system of mercantile tactics, and because the character of its members, partaking largely of that of the original banker of Frankfurt, combined many of those amiable qualities which secure popularity without forfeiting respect. They sought to make money by skill and industry, not parsimony. They gave a liberal share of their profits to all whose services were of use in attaining them, and their hand opened as day to melting charity, doubled the value of the gift by the grace with which it was presented, the grace impressed upon the external manner by a simple and kindly heart. We may now mention another circumstance which, on various occasions, must have contributed largely to the mercantile success of the family. Although their real union continued indissoluble, their places of residence were far asunder, each member of the house domiciling himself in a different country. At this moment, for instance, Anselm, at this moment in 1865, just remember, we have Anselm, born in 1773, resides at Frankfurt. Solomon, born in 1774, chiefly at Vienna. Charles, born in 1778, at Naples. And James, born in 1792, at Paris. The fifth brother, Nathan, born in 1777, resided in London and died at Frankfurt in 1837. The house was thus ubiquitous. It was spread like a network over the nations, and it is no wonder that, with all other things considered, its operations upon the money market should at length have been felt trembling by every cabinet in Europe. Its wealth, in the meantime, enabled it to enjoy those advantages of separation without the difficulties of distance. Couriers traveled and still travel from brother to brother at the highest speed of the time, and these private envoys of commerce very frequently outstrip the public expresses of government. We have no means of giving anything like the statistics of this remarkable business, but it is stated in the Conversations lexicon that in the space of 12 years, from 1813, the period, we may remark, when war had ruined all Europe, and when governments were only able to keep themselves afloat by flinging its financial burden upon posterity, from 11 to 1,200 millions of florins, that is, of $500 million to $600 million, were raised for the sovereigns of Europe through the agency of this house, partly as loans and partly as subsidies. Of these, 500 million florins were for England. Didn't they use florins in The Princess Bride? So I'm just imagining The Princess Bride as a setting for all this. Here we go. So we have 500 million florins were for England, 120 million for Austria, 100 million for Prussia, 200 million for France, 120 million for Naples, 60 million for Russia, 10 million for some of the German courts, and 30 million for Brazil. And this, it is added, is exclusive of those sums for the Allied courts, of several hundred millions each, which were paid as an indemnity for the war to the French, and likewise of the manifold preceding operations executed by the House as commissioners for different governments, the total amount of which far exceeded the foregoing. This, however, may already be considered an antiquated authority, for in reality the vast business of the firm can hardly be said to have commenced till after the dozen years referred to had expired. Since the year 1826, the house of Rothschild has been the general government bankers of Europe, and if it were possible to compare the two circles of transactions, the former would seem to dwindle into insignificance. In 1815, the brothers were appointed counselors of finance to the then Elector of Hesse, and in 1826 by the present Elector, privy councilors of finance. In 1818, they were elected to the Royal Prussian Privy Council of Commerce. In Austria, they received in 1815 the privilege of being hereditary landholders, and in 1822 were ennobled in the same country with the title of Baron. The brother established in London was appointed Imperial Council, and afterward Council General. And in the same year, 1822, the same honor was conferred upon the brother resident in Paris. The latter, the Baron James, has the reputation of being the most able financier in France, and it is mainly through his assistance and influence with the other capitalists that railways are now intersecting the length and breadth of the land. Nathan, the brother who resided in England, left 4 sons, 3 of whom rank among the most distinguished aristocracy of the British capital. The 4th, Nathan, residing in Paris. The eldest, Lionel de Rothschild, is privileged as a British subject to bear the title of an Austrian baron, his brothers being barons only by courtesy. The second has been recently created a baronet of England as Sir Anthony de Rothschild, and the third, Baron Meyer, is now High Sheriff of Buckinghamshire. Baron Lionel de Rothschild was invited by the Reform Association to stand as candidate with Lord John Russell for the representation of London in the present Parliament, and was returned 3rd on the list. Most of the members of this family have married and live in great splendor, and it must be observed as something characteristic of the race that their choice of wives has usually been a good one. Thank you. In London, where we know them best, the widow of Baron Nathan is held in great esteem for her inexhaustible charity, in the course of which we observe by the newspapers she has contributed largely towards the formation of an educational institution for the children of the Christian faith. Her sister, the lady of Sir Moses Montefiore, is popularly known as a suitable helpmate for her philanthropic partner. The sister of Baron Nathan, widow of the brother of Sir Moses Montefiore, is likewise well known for her liberality, and more especially for the large funds she has bestowed on the establishment of schools for all religious denominations. But there is another female of this remarkable family whom we must mention in a special manner, and with her name we conclude. She is the widow of the banker of Frankfurt, the mother of the 5 brothers, and grandmother of those flourishing men who are now rising proudly among the aristocracy of Europe. The following notice of this venerable and venerated lady we take from Les Matinées du Samedi. We take from Les Matinées du Samedi of General, that says just G, actually, I don't know what that is, G period, Ben Levy, in the Jews' Street at Frankfurt on the Main, in the midst of Gothic facades, black copings, and somber alleys, there is a house of small exterior, distinguished from others by its luxurious neatness, which gives it an appearance of singular cheerfulness and freshness. The brass on the door is polished, and the curtains on the window are as white as snow, and the staircase, an unusual thing in the damp atmosphere of this dirty quarter, is always dry and shining. The traveler who from curiosity visits this street, a true specimen of the times when the Jews of Frankfurt, subjected to the most intolerable vexations, were restricted to this infected quarter, will be induced to stop before the neat and simple home, and perhaps ask, who is that venerable old lady seated in a large armchair behind the little shining squares of the window on the first story? This is the reply that every citizen of Frankfurt will make. In that house dwelt an Israelite merchant named Meyer Anselm Rothschild. He there acquired a good name, a great fortune, and a numerous offspring, and when he died, the widow declared she would never quit, except for the tomb, the unpretending dwelling which had served as a cradle to that name, that fortune, and those children. Continued prosperity has attended the sons of the pious and modest widow. Their name is become European, their wealth proverbial. They inhabit sumptuous palaces in the most beautiful quarters of Paris, London, Vienna, Naples, and Frankfurt, but their mother, persevering in her admirable modesty, has not quitted her comparatively humble house, where those sons come to visit her with respect and reverence, and discharge their duties in memory of their estimable father, thus presenting bright examples for the present time. It's nice. I think I found my Purim costume.